Welcome to Blub Talks, a video podcast dedicated to introducing experts in the fields of speech therapy, education, families, and more to our community of parents, speech therapists, partners, and our wider audience. Hi, everybody. I'm Robert McKenzie, in-house teaching sensei, writer, and resident musician at Speech Blubs. And today I'm so pleased to introduce you to Susanna Chambers, a certified Agile coach, family coach, and Harvard X certified in family engagement and education. So, hi, Susanna, how are you?
Hi, Robert. I'm really well, thank you. Thanks for having me.
Oh, it's good to have you here. You're our first in a series of new podcasts, and we're very excited to speak with you. Okay, let's get started. Can you tell us a little bit about yourself and about your initiative about family learning?
Sure. So I am in my 40s. I've got 3 children aged 16, 13 and 10 who are the absolute lights of my life. They are my motivation for everything I do in my career as well. And I am so hugely passionate about family learning because it was an area that I got into earlier in my career in adult education. And it was remarkable to see the positive impact and the outcomes that it had for families that accessed classes in family learning. So my mission is to bring family learning to every family worldwide that wants to access it.
Excellent. Now let's just be clear a little bit, because for our American audience, family learning isn't something that is widely known. It's not homeschooling. It's not distance learning. Can you give us a little bit of contrast between those things?
Absolutely. And just to say, it's very understandable there is some confusion around this because there are some overlaps with other areas. So family learning is defined as any activity where there are learning outcomes for adults and children. So this may be parents or carers with their children learning at the same time. So as I refer to it, synchronously. Or it might be parents, for example, learning about the techniques that their teachers in an early years setting are using to teach their children letter formation or speech sounds or things around personal, emotional, behavioural patterns. And that might be done without the child there. So that's what I would refer to as asynchronously. And just to explain, again, family learning quite easily can be distance learning. It can be e-learning, as has been demonstrated during the pandemic, where some of that provision, luckily, has managed to be converted to online. But there is a common misconception that family learning is the same as homeschooling, right, which it is not. However, homeschooling is absolutely supported by great family learning. And of course, the research evidence shows that the home learning environment, which again, I use that very pointedly, is distinct from homeschooling. The home learning environment, so as in the environment in which young children from birth are experiencing how they interact with the world, that again is absolutely nurtured and developed through family learning approaches.
Can I ask you, how you got started on the family learning initiative? What motivated you to delve into it, do some research, and then become eventually lead in the UK or in England and Wales, right?
Yeah. Well, I started working in adult education in the early 2000s, which really suited my personality very well. I find I'm very highly rewarded by seeing people filled with joy and able to make the most of their lives. So adult education fit very well with me in that regard. But what happened was I experienced a very strange and bizarre emotion when I was working in the further education colleges. I discovered as I was going into the office that I was developing envy of some of my colleagues' learning resources. So I was seeing these beautiful, colourful folders and worksheets and all sorts of lovely, lovely things on their shelves. And frankly, Robert, I was quite jealous. I thought, well, I want some of those lovely resources. Why is all our stuff really boring? So that's initially what attracted me to it. And then inevitably, as a mother as well, As I then got into a role as a family learning manager, working in over 100 schools over a 9-year period in a council, I, of course, really was connecting with those learning opportunities as a mum, thinking about my own children and, what I found worked and what didn't work in terms of supporting my own children. And it's particularly worth mentioning that my eldest child, who is now 16, he wore hearing aids for 5 years. So it was picked up at the age of 4, and very, very fortunately, his speech was not delayed. He was reading fine. And one of the things that the audiologists in the hospital put that down to was the very strong foundations of communication that we'd established in the home learning environment through a family learning approach with eye contact and interactions. That's how I got into the wonderful world of family learning.
Excellent. Now, you mentioned your 3 wonderful children and the fact that we are still in the midst of the pandemic, and here where we are, we're in our 3rd lockdown. So my kids are at home. Let me ask you this: has family learning and its approaches affected your children's distance learning since they?
Okay, I'm trying to find a way to say this without sounding braggy.
No, it's okay. Bragging is okay.
But given that you've invited me on to hopefully help other families,
yes,
let's face it. I mean, if nothing else, the pandemic has really revealed to us that, resilient though many families may be, in the face of global pandemics, we're all impacted, right, in one way or another when something happens on the scale. So I honestly can say 2 things. Number one is that all 3 of my children, contrary to the messaging through the media around falling behind and what have you, they have excelled during the pandemic. They have, don't get me wrong, they've needed reminding about engaging with the distance learning,
I would imagine.
Particularly in the early stages, in the first lockdown, where the schools had not yet coordinated and they didn't have that online provision established. But they really, from day one, they knew it was expected that they would engage with learning of some description. B, they were doing that in the context of knowing fine well that I, as their mum, for example, would be challenging the schools to say, okay, you've set some work and they will probably do that work, but there may be days when they don't do the work that you set because they might be interested in pursuing other learning opportunities.
Mm-hmm.
Very interesting. And I strongly believe that firm but polite and positive dialogue with the schools is actually really important and very motivating for children, that it's not a command and control, thou shalt, you shall do this, tick, tick for somebody else to tick a box, but actually it's the joy of learning. So that, again, I think was a really important factor through the family learning approach that helped them excel during the school closures. And thirdly, again, the very practical things around routines and understanding about where, for example, in the house was their space going to be. And again, that family learning recognition that for one child, it might be sitting at a desk. And again, I know we're talking here in the context of early years children. So, for example, I can tell you that if we'd been going through this when my children were toddlers and what have you, I absolutely would have been giving them the freedom to do what they were learning out in the garden, if that's where they felt the most comfortable, sitting on a tricycle, sitting on a beanbag. The key thing is with family learning is about understanding A, what's being taught, B, how it's being taught, C, having the confidence to negotiate that, and D, giving the child license and agency in that power dynamic for how the learning happens. So that from my point of view are the 4 key factors for why my children have actually really excelled in this situation.
Speech is one of the main components of a child's development. Without speech, it is so much harder for children to express their needs, feelings, and opinions. The ability to speak also impacts their confidence, ability to connect with others, and success in life. We believe that every parent wants that for their child. Boost your child's ability to speak. Download Speech Blub's fun and educational speech app, used by more than 2 million parents just like you.
Well, I think you made that point really well in a blog post or a paper you posted on the Family Learning website about creating a space for learning. And it didn't have to be a dedicated space. It didn't have to be a dedicated room, because not everybody has the same resources as far as space goes, but it can just be putting aside a time that the child understands that space and that time with you as a parent is a learning time. Did I paraphrase that okay?
Oh, wonderfully, Robert, wonderfully. And also, one of the most underrated bedrocks of great family learning is that attachment and that bonding. And if you think about Maslow's hierarchy of needs in terms of, that sense of safety and security that is absolutely essential in order for all of the other cool stuff to happen, right? It's exactly the same with early years learning. So however many workbooks somebody might try to sit their child down and do in terms of letter formation, and don't get me wrong, I've done that and I can see the value, and
Sure.
There's a time and place for that. But actually, particularly if there are, let's say, challenges in the background, because families are all different, right? Just the starting point of a parent or carer, particularly if the child is distressed or frustrated about trying to engage with some learning, just physically sitting down with them, whether that's on the floor, whether that's in, on the front step, whatever, sit down with the child, hold them. You don't need to say anything. You can just sit there. And it is, in my experience with family learning, it is remarkable when I see parents taking that first step and just sitting in quiet with the child, the rest just flows. Because what ends up happening, for some kids, it's because they're a bit freaked out because maybe they've not had that experience very much with their parents. So they sort of distract and say, oh yeah, let's do this activity. And actually then it's the child leading it. Or it might be just that moment for the child and the adult to calibrate and settle, to get into a frame of mind for learning. And then very often it's just then a dance between the parent and the child. And I'm sure there are people listening to this that think, oh, Susanna, for goodness sake, you haven't seen my child. We don't do any dancing here. But my point is, you referred at the start to you being, I don't know how you phrased it, something sensei. And it's like the beauty of martial arts, right? That actually, what people don't see is the hundreds and hundreds of hours of effort and patience and dedication to build up that presence.
Well, if I can share this with you, and I mentioned this once before to you, a moment that sort of underscores that was when I was a fifth grade teacher in Hell's Kitchen, New York. And 75 to 80% of my students were from families that were non-native English speakers, recent immigrants and so on. So at the beginning of the year, the very beginning of the year, to make it a point, to make it important, I had the parents and the kids sign a contract that they would read 30 minutes a day together. And now I spoke Spanish, so most of this communication was in Spanish. But by the end of the year, I had, teachers don't get paid a lot, but there are rewards that are not quantifiable, and I remember several parents coming to me in tears saying, Mr. McKenzie, you taught not only my daughter to read English, but you taught me to read English. We're reading together every day still. She's in tears. I'm trying not to be in tears. And so that give and take, that creating that moment for them in an otherwise crazy, busy life was huge for them. So we did it again and again, and it shows success. Now let me ask you this. You said your kids have thrived during the at-home learning. Well, now they're back. in the UK, if I understand correctly. Can you tell me how their process was going back, what you had to do to prepare them, what you could do to support them when they came home, and the transitioning back and forth, lockdown, post-lockdown, back to lockdown, you know?
Sure. Well, first of all, before I answer that, congratulations on your huge success working with those families, because I was welling up then. That was lovely to hear about your success with that. So yeah, in terms of them transitioning back to school, again, I'm going to sound like I'm making this up, and I'm not, because people that know me know I'll be very honest about my failures, but honestly, they made that transition again really very smoothly back. The thing that was noticeable with my youngest child, so she's 10, she definitely, about 3 days before they were due to go back, had a bit of an emotional wobble. And
well, I'm going to steal that phrase if I can, an emotional wobble.
Bit of a wobble, yeah. And frankly, who wouldn't? I mean, if you think back to when our children are very, very small and they're actually starting in an early years setting for the first time, for example, that first moment of going into that setting, and the unfamiliarity of everything. I mean, let's face it, even if a child knows other children in their class because they spent some time with them, they'd had upheaval with having 2 different teachers during this time. And inevitably, even the most social child is going to, even before they start to get into a position to engage with the learning, they're going to have all of that socio-emotional stuff going on in the background, right? So that definitely was visibly evident in her. And again, the remedy for that was very much, again, tactile. It was very, very much about me. I mean, I have various roles in my career portfolio. I'm a very busy working mum. However, there are moments like that, right, where whatever is going on, you drop it. You drop it and you think, in this moment, this is irrecoverable.
Right.
And this is where I always emphasize with family learning that parents and carers are their children's first and most important educator. And this is a message that seems to have got lost for some reason in society. And part of my mission and my campaign to get family learning awareness out there and to make it available to as many families as possible is because I really want that message to get back into society, and parents being proud of the fact that they have such a huge, important role to play. It's not about just handing it off to teachers, and nor am I suggesting parents do that automatically, but parents and teachers working together is always going to be the most powerful combination. The research shows that. So that was interesting in my daughter. Now with my sons, because of the age they are, there's a requirement here for them to wear masks all day, every day.
Right.
On the school bus, in the corridors, in the classroom, during the exams, all of that. And my eldest is in his what we call GCSE year here. So these are like the official exams, like senior exams. Mm-hmm. And of course, all of that has been thrown into turmoil. But you know what? Just in the way that with family learning, I've always encouraged the children to say, okay, right, you've got this piece of homework, or, hey, there's this activity. Look at this activity we've got here. Right, so we've got these, random boxes, or, we've got that paint over there. Right, let's just see where it goes. What would you like to do with it? You lead us. And actually, as a parent, being a passenger on that journey. And I suppose with the children transitioning back into school, it's been interesting seeing how that modelling of learning has almost played out in terms of how they have had a positive mindset about going back into school. My younger son, my 13-year-old, he in particular really, really excelled.
You said he took to it very well.
Yeah. And it just proves the point again, doesn't it, for all those families listening out there, that, you can be the same parent, you can have the same approach to supporting your child's learning and development in the same home learning environment And those children can be affected very differently. So you've always got to be on your toes to adapt
Right.
and listen and tune in. So yeah, he was less keen. He was less keen, to go back into that environment. But again, he's just kind of, rolled with it.
One of the things that I have found in the time my kids have been home is my need to remain patient about small victories. Small moments that come that you don't even see coming are in some ways more important than hoping and pushing for learning a big subject, studying, getting a great grade. I think it's more about what I tell my kids. I don't care about your grades. I care about how hard you worked. I care how much you learned. If you work hard and if you learn, the grades will take care of themselves. And, when school is all done, you'll look back on it and laugh. Oh, I was, amazing, But I think the remaining patient aspect, parents have had to relearn since their kids have been home. Because they do shuffle them off. They shuffle them off to teachers, hope they come back finished, like a finished product. And they're realizing that a teacher should make more money. That's between you and me. Should make more money. And it's not so easy,
Exactly. Yeah. And the patience thing, as I've mentioned earlier, with that thing about, just quietly sitting with your child. Just what's that phrase they use? Loving touch. Right. So loving touch is one of the most powerful learning tools between a parent and a child, okay, to set the scene. Because what tends to happen, as we know, even from the earliest children, where you've got an 18-month-old or whatever that's, messing around with crayons and scribbling and all the mark making and all of those skills that stem from that. Even with that, I have seen it thousands of times, and I've seen it in my own family sometimes, the table, the child sits on the chair, or the child is lifted onto the chair. The crayons and the paper are put out for the child, okay? And there's quite a high degree of, this seems to be one extreme or the other, either a very high degree of direction or, right, you get on with that while I do the dishes. Yeah. And family learning is a beautiful bridge between that, because what it's saying is, I, as your parent, in the way you've just described, Robert, with your children, I, as your parent, am passionately committed to learning from you and the joy that you get from your learning, and I can learn from you. But you have, even as a very, very small toddler, you have a lot of power to shape that journey.
And I'll tell you a secret, a very short secret.
Sure.
I have a 17-year-old boy who doesn't want to spend much time with either me or my wife. So I usually come into his room, and there are two ways to do it. One is saying, how you doing? How's it going? And make it very flippant. And that way he's not too thinking I'm judgy. But the thing that works is for me to come up behind him and put my hand on his shoulder.
There you go.
And just say, how's it going? And the responses between those two situations are so different. Like, I get the teenage response with the first way, but the second I put my hand on his shoulder, it's okay. I'm working at it. And I said, so you're right on it. You're hitting the nail on the head. As far as that goes.
And it's lovely to hear, because as we know, a 17-year-old needs a parent as much as a 2-year-old in many ways, right?
Small children, small problems, big children, big problems.
Exactly. Well, I'm just enjoying the fact that during lockdown still that I know where my 16-year-old is. At least I know. I go to his room and he's actually in there. But with just coming back to this thing, I'm not for 1 minute expecting that, I'm not suggesting that, for all early learning that children have, that they constantly need to be, touched on the arm or what have you. However, used sparingly, as you said, particularly when we know that children have particular triggers, or where we as parents can feel it in ourselves, getting frustrated about, well, like, I'm busy and why can't you do that? And like, oh well, so and so's child can do that already, and all of those inner feelings that, a lot of people are ashamed to actually admit that they have, but are very natural instinctively for parents to have. All of that can just be diffused so easily. Now, family learning, of course, again, is very powerful in that regard, because family learning classes have traditionally taken place in a school or community venue. Okay. And as I say, some of those classes, whether it's about early literacy or whether it's about, playing skills, whether it's about parenting, loads of those skills are possible to do online. One of the really cool things about family learning, whether it's online or if it's in person, is that it's actually really distinguishing then between the contribution that a parent has to make to a child's experience of the world, as opposed to the perception that the child has of the teacher. Because, of course, as we know, what happens, and it's fueled by the education systems, and, as you know, I've been involved with a lot of education research over the years. What tends to happen is, as soon as a child is exposed then to that dichotomy between this is the setting and this is home, of course we all need a break, in the same way as us as adults. We need some kind of line, right, between home and work, which has been one of the challenges for the pandemic. But where there is then an artificial divide, where children see, the parent, well, you're not my teacher, you don't know what you're talking about, you can't help me with my homework because that's not how my teacher shows me. That's where it starts to get dangerous. So if from the earliest years the child is growing up seeing the parent being interested in what their child is learning and thinking, oh, wow, okay, well, actually, my dad has got the confidence to reach out to my parent, my teacher, and ask the question, and again, that's really important to guide those expectations early in life, because otherwise the other thing that can start happening, which becomes an anti-pattern later, is that children can then almost end up playing off the parents against the teachers, because if they think, well, my parents don't know anything about that, all they do is come to the parent conferences. And that's it.
Let me ask you this. If, okay, I'm new to family learning. I'm very interested in getting started, more of an approach to it, a practical approach. What would you tell our parents, the top 3 or 4 tips to get started with this? What can they do?
Okay, so I've already mentioned the thing about really just blast open your expectations of what is important for learning. Okay. Secondly, the first thing I would say right from babyhood around literacy and language development, particularly in terms of reading, I would say, is try to, persevere. We all know children, if they love a book, they're going to want to hear it about 200 times, right? So I would just say the research really does show that pays off in terms of children's language and literacy development. So even if you really don't think you can read, we're going on a bear hunt for the 400th time in the last month. please hang on in there, because it is because it is going to be so worth it, in terms of all kinds of outcomes that you're likely statistically to see in your child later. So that's the first thing. Now, related to we're going on a bear hunt, the second thing is, and this wouldn't surprise you with me obviously being a musician as well, is the power of singing and rhyme is immense. And
that brings up a next question. You're a musician, you're a performing musician, and you also teach music. So go ahead. I just want people to know that and how that affects you and what you do.
Yeah, sure. Well, it's kind of twofold, really, because on the one hand, I could very easily be accused of, well, it's okay for you because you can sing, you like to sing, yeah. But I grew up around a lot of singing. I grew up around a lot of music. Many of my earliest childhood memories are being around music and my parents sharing music with me. And what that luckily gives me in terms of being able to teach family learning, but also to be able to kind of promote it and spot great family learning where it exists, is that I guess I've got the confidence to lead those activities. And it is true, obviously in terms of a tutor, an adult learning tutor or a family learning tutor that would tend to lead those classes, if they are confident to lead those songs and the rhymes, that's obviously going to make it much more easy for parents, particularly if they haven't had exposure to that. Say, for example, your parents didn't sing to you or they didn't use rhymes a lot. That's going to make it a lot easier for people to get involved. Now, of course, the kids just go with it because the kids love the singing and the rhymes, right? And all the actions. So the actions, yeah. But then on the other hand, what I also say, and I have seen it transform communication again in the earliest years, is where a parent is able to be supported through family learning to get past this blocker they've got in their mindset about, well, I can't sing, or oh, it's so embarrassing, or oh my, and just saying to them,
doesn't matter.
Yeah, exactly. Your child does not care how good a singer you are.
No.
What your child will experience is the endorphins that come from the fun of the experience that you share. They're going to absolutely thrive with their communication, seeing your smile, even if it's an embarrassed smile, just the laughter with other parents, as you're sharing singing, and of course hearing the parent's voice, which, as we know, I mean, that's the most primal thing, right, in the womb, hearing the parents' voices. So all of those things combined, I think, make even saying rhymes, but especially singing, an absolute magical ingredient, for getting very naturally arising family learning going on in the home. Now, the third one I would say is, again, just be very, very open-minded and wing it. I say wing it, most of the time. You don't need to have extremely fancy high-tech equipment to create incredible learning experiences, right? So I always say to parents, one of the really good ways to get family learning going in the home learning environment is to say to your child, you might be playing something like I Spy. And then when you've got the object, actually say, oh, that's interesting, isn't it? Right. Should we have a look at this? If the child's old enough, you might even ask them, go and fetch mummy that, please. Could you please? And again, you're modeling the language then by the way in which you're making the rest, please, could you fetch that book for mummy? And, play around with the language. And then when they've brought the item to you, really have almost like a shared deep dive, exploring, inspecting the object. Okay. And of course, around the house, even if you live in a 1-bedroom flat, there are infinite possibilities for deeply looking at something, whether it's a, piece of paper and, well, what can we do with this? What can we create with this? Or, the TV remote, or, all of that stuff. And really, using discussion and jointly experiencing those props, for want of a better word, as an opportunity to model the language, grow the vocabulary. So even with the TV remote, for example, it might be like, wow, aren't they brilliant buttons, alliteration, and look, we've got red and green and blue. And to us as adults, it sounds ridiculous, but of course for the child, it will just be absolutely blowing their mind with the variety and the richness of vocabulary.
I always say, never doubt the power of being wrong on purpose. I constantly make mistakes with my kids to provoke them to correct me. I love to correct me.
That's great.
Daddy, oh my God. And then they're going, no, Daddy, it means this. This is how it's going to do. You're wrong. I said, oh, really? But this, let's think about this. Because if it's this and then it's this, then why isn't it this? Oh, Daddy, give me a break.
That's so awesome. That is brilliant.
Yeah, just pride is a bad thing in teaching.
Well, actually, with you saying that, you've tapped into something really important there as well, because that, that's fantastic that, you are able to do that, and that's great.
Mm.
And what I would say is family learning, again, is very unique in the value it can bring to families, because one of the other things that it does, by nature of the fact that it's mainly focused on, yes, it's shared learning, it's intergenerational learning, but traditionally a big part of that model has been around bridging that homeschool communication or home nursery communication, kindergarten education, as I've referred to. But we can't escape the fact that many, many of us, myself included, actually, I mean, I was terribly bullied for years at school. It went on for years and years and years. And luckily, I came out the other side of it and I was resilient. But I was with a lot of children at school that weren't. And even now we're in our 40s, I can see in their ways that they talk about school and how they experience school, that has had a profound lifelong effect, both on their parenting, but also on their confidence to intervene when they feel that their child is struggling with something. So family learning is a great way to create that safe space where the parent is respected, both by the child and also by the teacher, as being a key player in that dynamic, and being having a right to have their voice heard.
Right. This co-learning system, almost, it just sounds fascinating, and something that I think we need to talk about more. Susanna, I'm so happy to have spoken with you and to introduce you to our audience. Our audience should know that you also do family coaching as well, and related to family learning. And I know that our community will be interested to learn more about you and your continuing work. You'll find links to her important sites below this video. And if you like this video, don't forget to like and subscribe to future Blub Talks. And check out our Facebook and Instagram pages for more information about speech blubs and reading blubs. And if you haven't already, download Speech Blubs app to help your little one speak. Thank you so much, Susanna.
Thank you, Robert. It's been awesome. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, you're welcome. Thank you very much. Cheers.
Take care. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.
Thanks for tuning in. Make sure to like, share, and subscribe for more content like this. Follow us on Instagram, Facebook, and Pinterest at Speech Blubs. Visit our website, speechblubs.com, for more information on speech development created by experts. Last but not least, download the Speech Blubs app to explore how you can improve your child's speech with us.